Hello everybody, I'm Brother Neuro. You know, the human mind is a bizarre and fascinating thing. It is undoubtedly our most powerful tool when it comes to determining what defines us as a species and that which makes us unique. But there is a downside to being in possession of a human mind. If it is misused or the owner fails to use it to its full potential, then that person is destined to almost certainly become an idiot. And if you take that idiot and combine them with an unjustified amount of self-confidence, an inability to think critically, and a desire to prove to almost everyone they can that they are in fact the smartest person in the room, you might end up being an LBC caller. If you've been following me for any amount of time, you already know that I fucking love talk radio. It has been the source for literally dozens, possibly even hundreds of hours of content that I have made over the last few years. A couple of years ago I did a 22-hour live stream just listening to LBC callers, but YouTube won't render it because it's too long. But I won't delete it because fuck them. As someone who is old enough, and I don't want to flex or anything, but I am old as fuck, I'm old enough to have lived more than half of my life without the internet. And in those pre-internet years, my number one source of entertainment was talk radio. Now, what's interesting about talk radio is that unlike almost every other type of media, particularly news media, it has actually grown in popularity in the internet age. And it's done that without actually ever having to change much of its format. This is because talk radio literally contains all of the elements that you need to make for compelling and popular online content. The calls and interactions are relatively short. They contain conflict, drama, politics, people screaming at each other, and more often than not, at least one of the people involved in the interaction will end up making a complete and utter fucking twat of themselves. In the UK, the biggest talk radio station currently is LBC, Leading Britain's Conversation. Dun dun dun. And the most popular host on LBC is James O'Brien. Now, I say popular in air quotes because when I mean popular, I mean that in the sense that he has the most listeners, not that he is necessarily the most beloved, although that might very well be true as well. But he's also probably equally the most hated. Part of being a successful talk radio show host involves being able to attract listeners not just who like you and agree with you, but also who hate you and vehemently disagree with you with an unhealthy and violent passion. Why? Because those are the people, the haters, the angry people, they are the ones who are most likely to call in. There is an expression in the UK that goes something like, they are a Marmite person. And what that means is that this person is a type of person who people either love or hate. There's no in-between or middle ground. There's no, they're all right. It's like, fuck him. It's like, love him. He's a cunt. And that is the best talk radio show host. The ones who are the most marmitiest of all the marmitey people. And currently, and over the last few years, no one is more marmitey than James O'Brien. Now, for most of its existence, the vast majority of talk radio hosts have been either very right-wing or, at best, right of centre. And the reason for this isn't what you might think. You see, the whole point of talk radio is to get people to call into the show. If you have no callers, you have no show. You have no show, you have no listeners. So the best talk radio hosts are the ones who are able to express the most divisive and controversial opinions in the most sort of provocative and antagonistic way, and in a way that can be summed down and boiled down into very, very short sound bites and sentences. And it just so happens, and I mean literally no disrespect with this, it just so happens that conservatives and right-wingers are much better at doing that than left-wingers. That's not to say that all of them were awful people, but for the most part, the hosts in general, or at least the ones I listened to, were as obnoxious, awful and intolerable as you can possibly imagine. But, in their defence, they were just doing their job, and considering I was listening to them pretty much every day, they were clearly doing it very well. So, Here's the question. In a world dominated by loud, bombastic, proudly ignorant, big-mouthed right-wingers, how on earth did someone like James O'Brien, who is the exact opposite of that, become the daddy of talk radio? Now, whilst O'Brien is in no way a card-carrying radical pinko commie, the fact that he challenges a lot of right-wing ideology and rhetoric and beliefs, whilst also defending, very often and, popularly maligned so-called left-wing ideas like maybe political correctness, feminism, or, as we're about to see later, wokeness. In the eyes of most right-wingers, he might as well be Chairman Mao. He also tends to take a much less antagonistic and aggressive attitude towards anyone who is going to disagree with him, the people he wants usually to call in. And this is an approach which, ironically, is often interpreted and taken by his political opponents as being patronising, fake, and virtue signalling, which just winds them up even more. He's also often accused of being part of the metropolitan liberal establishment simply because he's quite well spoken, reasonably so, and he believes in very sort of elitist, leftist ideas such as knowing things and data. But in my opinion, the thing that has made James O'Brien stand out from the pack is not just his presentation or just his the arguments he's making. The thing that separates O'Brien from the rest is his very, very unique ability to almost effortlessly deconstruct and destroy people's beliefs within sometimes less than a minute, and putting very little work in order to get them to do it. How does he do it? Simple. By asking them what they mean by the words that they say. And if they can do that, and many of them can't, he will then say, like what? And at almost 99.9% of the time, at that moment, the caller is fucked. Now, if you're a reasonable human being, and by that I mean, your mother didn't drink varnish when she was pregnant with you, you might ask, how is it even possible for that to happen? What would possess someone to call into the most popular radio station and talk to the most popular talk radio show host on the most popular talk radio show in the country and confidently express an opinion that literally disintegrates and falls apart when subjected to the most basic of scrutiny? The best answer I can give you is to refer back to the start of this video, when I said the human mind is a bizarre and fascinating thing. Now, in order to demonstrate the ease with which James O'Brien is able to do what he does, I'm now going to take one of the videos of one of his calls, and this was one of the most popular videos on the LBC channel. Now, the premise of this phone-in for the day, the topic that James O'Brien was asking, and as most talk radio show hosts do, they start the show with a monologue and a question. What does wokeness mean? What does it mean to be woke? And that question was enough to provoke a phone call from this poor, unsuspecting son of a bitch.
James, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. Yeah, I'm anti-woke.
Excellent. Is it in your Twitter profile?
I don't have Twitter, I've got Instagram, but it's in my Instagram.
What does it mean?
profile.
What does it mean?
Now, right away, James has managed to get the guy to admit that he has the words anti-woke in his Instagram profile. Now, that wasn't a joke or a little bit of a snidey bit of sass on James O'Brien's part. The reason he asks him that is because if the guy does have it in his social media profile description, and he does, then what James is doing is he is leaving him with virtually no excuse for not being able to answer the question of what does woke mean. Because it's reasonable to assume that any ideological descriptor that a person uses in their social media profile or bio, it must be something that they give something of a shit about and take seriously.
But what does it mean to me? People have different interpretations of anti-woke or wokenism.
Now, the question James O'Brien asked was, what does it mean? And this guy immediately decides to dodge that question, and he changes it to, what does it mean to me? Or what does it mean to you? But before he even answers his own version of James's question, he then justifies the fact that he's changing it by stating that, now, many people have their own definitions of woke an ism. So he's already mispronounced it too. Now, why on earth would anyone proudly identify, as this guy does, as anti-woke, as a person who is against anything or something whose definition can literally change depending on who you're talking to? That makes no sense.
To me, it means people who seek offence where it doesn't exist. They look for the tiniest little thing and pin on it. And
But everyone would be anti that, wouldn't they?
Now, this is the most blatantly obvious textbook example of what is known as a straw man fallacy that you will ever get. Right? He's choosing to redefine wokeness as something that is inherently bad and almost objectively bad in the eyes of most people, and then choosing to oppose it based on that. Now, even if his new definition was actually based in fact, this is not how he should go about proving or establishing that. So, at this point already, we know one of two things is true. Either this guy is very bad at just structuring his argument, which might be the case, or B, he doesn't actually know what woke means.
No, it's a bit like driving in a bus lane, but not your full car's not in the bus lane. It's just one wheel that's in the bus lane.
Well, clearly the answer is B. Now, if you're confused by his simile, don't feel bad, because it took me a while to figure out the point he was trying to make, which is that people who are woke are just like people who will accuse someone of driving in the bus lane even though only one wheel went over the line. Now, I could sit here for an hour and rattle off many reasons as to why that is a terrible analogy that makes little to no sense, but I don't have to, because the fact that he is using an analogy or a metaphor or a simile at all is enough to prove that this guy knows nothing about what he's talking about, and he doesn't understand what woke means or what it is, let alone why he is against it. How do I know this? Because if he did know what it means, and if he had real-world examples, he would just list them off. Loads of incidents and occasions when wokeness has happened. But he doesn't. He chose to make up some weird, bizarre comparison. And this is why James then asks him...
You've lost me now. So being someone who's hypersensitive and pedantic is that's annoying and boring for everybody. Maybe we should work in examples. So when you come across when and where do you come across the sort of wokeness to which you are so passionately opposed?
Now, at this point, we are just 59 seconds into this call, and even though the caller doesn't really know it yet, believe me when I tell you that he is now fucked.
Well,
apart from in the bus lane.
That little nervous fake laughter that he just done there, that was obviously, again, nerves, but it's also him trying to buy some time. He's trying to delay the conversation or slow it down as much as he can so he can try and think of a good way to answer James's question, because he's now starting to realise what the answer's going to be, and he's understanding the gravity of the situation.
I used to work in local authority. I'm now self-employed, but when I worked in local authority, you didn't get on with your work. There was a few hours a week dedicated to these sort of woke agendas.
Yeah, go on.
Going on these sort of courses and these internal training courses.
And I shit you not, that is the best answer he could come up.
Well, like what, though? What were they teaching you?
It was all very insincere.
Well, you might have been. You can't speak for anybody else.
No, but the
So what were they teaching you?
So these trainers...
What sort of courses?
These trainers would hold these courses.
Yeah.
And, I know how much they're paid. They're paid an absolute fortune, and they regurgitate...
That's not anti-woke, mate. That's just envy. So what were the courses? What were they designed to do?
Well, I'm very envious.
I know you are, but what were the courses designed to do? What were they training you to do? What were they doing?
I think they were designed to stifle rational discussion and debate.
Now, at this moment, this phone call is just under 2 minutes in, and already this guy, if you're counting, has committed 4 straw man fallacies. And just like his redefining of woke was proof that he didn't know what it actually meant or why he opposed it, so too his claim that these meetings at work were meant to stifle rational debate is also proof that he probably doesn't know what they were actually for or what happened in them. So, James, obviously knowing this, asks him the question again.
Well, they put that on the agenda. They put that on the door, did they?
No, but that was
so.
the
What
intention.
were they designed to do? What sort of courses are we
Well, I
talking
just
about?
said, am I in an echo chamber?
Well, clearly not, mate. No. Do you know what that means?
No, I don't, but
No.
you're going to tell me.
Now, I think even the most ardent anti-wokeist or anti-James O'Brien fan would struggle to come up with an argument that suggests that it was unfair or unreasonable in any way for James O'Brien to repeat the question, because the guy didn't answer it, so James asked him again. This is the first time you can clearly hear in the caller's voice that the guy is starting to get nervous, but he doesn't want James or anyone else listening to think that, so he does what all insecure men do when they face the possibility of public humiliation. He overcompensates quite drastically by saying, "I just told ya," in a derisory tone and mockingly, and then making a somewhat nonsensical echo chamber joke. He then scoffs at James O'Brien for asking him if he knows what an echo chamber is, and sarcastically replies with, "No, but I bet you're going to tell me," which is ironic, seeing as how up until this point in the conversation, the only person who has tried to redefine literally every aspect of this conversation is him. But James isn't going to let him get away with that, because this is the other thing that O'Brien does. He will not let it lie. So he asks him again, this time a bit slower and a bit clearer.
What were the courses officially designed to do?
Right. So we'd go on these courses,
Yeah.
and you'd all be in a room, and it would be some topical discussion
Oh, God. Down with that sort of thing.
about something that's happened lately.
The unnecessary pause, the slowness of his delivery, and coupled along with the amount of just utterly useless information that he gave in that short little burst there, is now conclusive proof that this guy is completely fucked, and he now knows it. He knows that he's fucked. In just 2.5 minutes, this guy went from, "Yeah, I'm anti-woke, I've got it in my fucking Instagram profile," and he stormed in all fucking brash and bravado. Now he's been reduced to a slow, stammering, confused mess. This is the point where he should just have hung up the phone and run away and hid under the duvet. But, unfortunately, his overinflated ego has convinced him that if he stays on the course, he can still salvage some kind of dignity out of this conversation. Spoiler alert, he will not.
So what would happen?
It's awful, isn't it?
So what would happen?
Yeah.
The powers that be would say, "Oh, we better, this has happened in America.
Right.
We better send everyone on a course."
For example?
I don't want to quote examples, really.
You kind of have to.
Now, the example that he is referring to, and you'll have to wait a bit in the call before you understand how I know this, is the murder of George Floyd by former policeman Derek Chauvin. But he doesn't want, for some reason, to say that that's what he's talking about out loud. Why? Because he knows what it's going to make him look like and sound like in the eyes of a lot of people. We now also know why, at the start of the conversation, he decided to use this weird metaphor involving cars and bus lanes. It's actually not because he didn't have any real-world examples of what he was talking about or complaining about. It's because the one example, seemingly the main example that he has, makes him look, at best, like a callous, insensitive prick, or at worst, a massive racist and a callous, insensitive prick at the same time. And at this point, James O'Brien knows that the damage is done, and all he has to do is sit back and let this guy flounder and flail around until he either gives up or James O'Brien takes mercy on him and decides to put him out of his misery.
I can't, because then you'll get everyone.
That's the point, isn't it, though? So something that actually happened. That's all.
Well, you bring one up, and I'll give you. I'll play out a scenario.
No, because you're telling me what it means.
Go on.
And the example is these courses that you went on, and the rooms that you sat in, and the speeches that you listened to. So just tell me what they were about.
Let me think of one.
Take your time.
Still there?
Yeah.
Now, this is just speculation on my part, but I swear that I could hear desperation in that guy's voice when he asked, "You still there?" Like, hoping and praying that James O'Brien hadn't. In fact, it was very wise of James and quite brave of him to go silent there, because one of the rules of radio is dead air is a crime, as we know this, if you watch Alan Partridge.
Oh, good. But let's say, for example...
sounds like someone's been watching Ben Shapiro.
Preventing barriers to staff progression. So people from certain religions, cultures, races, etc.
But you were going to give me an example of something that had happened in America.
Yeah, so that's happened. No, I won't bring that up. I think...
Well, why not? Why don't you bring that up?
Because I think most of your listeners know what I'm referring to.
I have not got a clue.
Here's a tip, folks. If you find yourself in a position where you are being pressed to say something or talk about something that you really don't want to say or talk about, the worst thing you can do is to try and get out of it by saying, "I think most people listening or watching this know exactly what I'm talking about." Because if that were indeed true, then you now have no reason to be scared or fearful of saying it out loud. Cue James.
Okay.
So tell us. Just keep an eye on the tape, the emergency tape that kicks in when we have periods of silence that go over us. So just tell us. Everybody already knows, Carl. So just tell us what it is you object to having courses on when you worked at a local authority.
Well, I just think it's really insincere.
Yeah, but we can't really know what that means until you tell us what it was, can you? So what was it, mate?
Things I'm a bit scared to go down the rabbit hole.
I am a bit scared to go down this rabbit hole. There we have it, folks. 4.5 minutes ago, this guy had no fear, no anxiety, no apprehension about phoning up the most popular talk radio show in the entire country. He had no fucking doubt in his mind. There was no second thoughts. Now, here we are, not even 5 minutes later, and when faced with the cold, harsh reality of what he believes, the consequences of him admitting that, and probably for the first time in his life, he's starting to feel nervous and uncertain about his beliefs because of how, not just because of how it will make him look in the eyes of other people, but how deep down he knows how he thinks it makes himself look.
Just to be clear, you didn't
me up and accuse
to be clear, you didn't ring in. You didn't ring in by accident, did you?
No, of course not.
No. So you rang in to answer a question about what I am anti-woke. You said. What does that mean? And you said it. Here are some examples, and I said just name one.
And you said, what does it mean to you? So what does it mean to me?
Yeah.
It means to me people that actively seek offence where it doesn't exist.
Yeah. So what were the courses?
Well, various courses.
Yeah,
so
just give me one example then.
Well, preventing staff progression. People...
What do you think that means?
Well, just stop them progressing in their career.
So they were teaching you how to stop progressing in your career?
Not me, personally.
I suspect you didn't need any lessons.
No, I didn't. I went to work.
On a side note, this guy is now mentally spiralling so badly. In his head, he is so fucking all over the place that he didn't even notice that James O'Brien just quite clearly insulted him with that "I suspect you didn't need any lessons" line, because he replied to it as if it was an actual statement. That is how fucking... And it wasn't like a deadpan, subtle, subversive joke. It was quite obviously a bit of sass on O'Brien. But this guy didn't even twig it. That is how fucking off his fucking tree he is. That is how out of his mind with fucking fear and fucking anxiety he is at this moment. Right now, metaphorically speaking, he is probably riding a tsunami of his own fucking fearful urine at this point.
I didn't go into work.
So what were you taught?
And be nice.
Oh, so these were courses encouraging people to behave and be nice that you object to. That's what you mean by woke. That's what all my other callers have already said.
I think we learn this when we grow up.
Well, some of us do.
I grew up in London.
Well, you're very lucky. You're already very nice and well behaved. What about people who aren't? Surely they'd benefit from these courses, Carl.
Well, they are the ones that should be marginalised. But why do people look?
You want to marginalise people now? Isn't that woke? You want to marginalise people who aren't very nice? That's what everyone else has told me is woke.
No, I want the people that are nasty and horrible.
Yeah.
Marginalise them. Get rid of them.
That's woke, though. That's what woke means. You're pro-woke, mate. You're not anti-woke.
Your council tax shouldn't pay to send me on a day course.
Well, you need to tell me what the course was. What's the course?
Pay for your bins to be collected.
On the contrary, I want local authorities to be run in a way that is forward-thinking and progressive. And if some people, not you, because you don't need these courses, but if some people are holding back the rest of the organisation, then I think giving them some training is a wonderful idea. Go on, just tell everyone the thing that they already know that you're talking about, but you're not prepared to say out loud. Because otherwise people might think you're a bit woke. You're frightened of causing offence, are you? Isn't that what woke means? I
have been cowed into silence by your lot.
And there we have it, folks. With that one declarative statement, I have been cowed into silence. This guy is now figuratively waving a white flag of surrender. That is the closest you're going to get. He's never going to admit he's wrong, because that is the last refuge of the anti-woke, anti-PC, anti-SJW, right-wing facts don't care about your feelings brigade, is when your views do not align up with the cold hard facts of reality. Simply play the victim, pretend to be the martyr, and run away injured with your tail between your legs. I will now just let the rest of the call play out.
No, mate, you have tied yourself in knots single-handedly.
I've been cowed into silence. You know who you are. It's your curtain twitchers. It's your ones that look out of their window and look for a fence where it doesn't exist.
At what point in this conversation do you think you lost the plot
completely? Are you on nextdoor.com, James? Are you on nextdoor.com?
Listen, I'm very happily married, Carl. So
no, you know nextdoor.com. It's a society website.
Mate, I'm very happily married. Let's not go weird. Final chance. Are you going to give me an example of something that is woke, or are we just going to wave goodbye to each other and fill in the gaps for ourselves?
I'll let you fill in the gaps.
Now, you see, I've got a horrible feeling that you've done the polar opposite of what you rang in to do, and you've proved all the previous callers completely right. But, good luck to you.
And there we have it, folks. That is literally all that James O'Brien has to do. And I can already hear some people saying, and they might have already typed it before they got to the end of this video, saying, oh, but this is just one caller, and he was clearly an idiot. He was probably even handpicked. I'm like, yeah, well, that's what everyone says. So maybe it's weird how the idiots are always the ones who tend to have the courage to phone up, whereas the people who think that all the callers are idiots, but also technically agree with them, never do phone in. And so to those people, I say, if you're so confident, you give him a fucking call. It's got nothing to do with me. And the fact is, if anyone who follows this stuff as closely as I do, they will back me up when they say this is just literally one of hundreds of thousands of other examples I could have used that all went the same way, that ended the same fashion, and with just as little effort and with as much ease as that. That's the end of this video, folks. If you've enjoyed it, give it a like, post a comment, subscribe, and please, why not support me on Patreon and tweet this video out, share it around. In fact, tweet it to O'Brien, saying, hey, O'Brien, acknowledge me. And by me, I mean Dick Coughlin. Thank you for watching. My name's Dick Coughlin, Brother Neuro. Where there's no sense, there's no feeling. Good night. May God be less.